The sun was just setting over the luxury hotel, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Inside, Steven Seagal, the legendary action star, martial arts master, and owner of this very hotel, casually walked through the grand lobby. His presence was calm, almost casual, but there was an edge to him, the kind that only comes from someone who's used to being in control. He had every right to be here after all. This was his property. Yet, as he approached the front desk, something unexpected happened. A security guard stepped forward, blocking his path, a firm expression on his face. "Sir, you can't go in right now," the guard said, tone unusually harsh. Steven blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Excuse me? This is my hotel," he replied, his voice steady but firm. The guard didn't flinch. He didn't recognize the man in front of him, the man whose name was known worldwide. Instead, he repeated, "I said you can't enter. Rules are rules." At that moment, the air in the lobby changed. Guests slowed down, whispering to each other, glancing at the growing tension. Some pulled out their phones, instinctively recording what was unfolding. The audience could feel it already. Something shocking was about to happen. Steven took a deep breath. Calm. Controlled. He was no stranger to confrontation, but this was surreal. Being denied access to his own property? The audacity was staggering. And yet, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't lash out. Instead, he simply looked around, his gaze sharp, scanning the faces of the staff and security. Then came the first whispers from nearby guests. "Isn't that? That looks like Steven Seagal." But the guard remained oblivious, standing his ground as if nothing unusual was happening, and that's when the first mental trap hit the audience. They realized the absurdity. The legendary action hero, known for disarming opponents and commanding attention wherever he goes, was now being treated like an ordinary guest, or worse, a troublemaker in his own hotel. What Steven did next stunned everyone in the lobby, and nobody could have predicted the chaos that was about to unfold. Have you ever been denied entry somewhere you actually had the right to? Type yes or no in the comments. I want to see your reactions. Little did anyone know. What started as a bizarre misunderstanding was about to escalate in ways that would shock staff, guests, and the internet alike. The lobby was now thick with tension. Guests had stopped moving, their eyes glued to the scene unfolding before them. Steven Seagal, calm yet visibly irritated, stood facing a security guard who seemed determined to deny him access to his own hotel. Around them, staff whispered nervously to each other, unsure how to handle the situation. Cameras quietly clicked as some guests pulled out their phones, capturing every second. "Sir, I told you, you can't go in," the guard repeated, his voice sharp, unwavering. Steven tilted his head slightly, maintaining eye contact. "I think you misunderstand," he said evenly. "This is my hotel. I own this place." The guard's jaw tightened. He glanced at his colleague for reassurance but received only nervous nods. The absurdity of the situation was starting to draw the attention of everyone nearby. Whispers began circulating through the lobby. "Isn't that Steven Seagal?" one guest murmured. The movie star, the guard, however, seemed oblivious, as if the world-renowned action hero before him were just another guest causing trouble. And that's when Steven's calm demeanor began to contrast sharply with the growing hostility of the situation. His calm, deliberate movements and steady voice created a mental tension for everyone watching. Something extraordinary was about to happen, and the audience could feel it in their own chest. The slow build of confrontation was intoxicating. "I don't want trouble," Steven continued, "but I will not be denied entry to my own property." The guard raised a hand, signaling Steven to step back, and suddenly the energy in the room shifted. The staff, once quietly anxious, now started murmuring among themselves. Some glanced at Steven with recognition in their eyes, but fear kept them silent. As the situation escalated, Steven's presence began to dominate the space. Every step he took, deliberate and slow, drew the attention of every person in the lobby. Guests began recording more openly now, sensing that this was no ordinary confrontation. The lobby had transformed into a silent theater of suspense. Before this gets even crazier, I want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see how global this is. The security guard's tone hardened further. I don't care who you are. You need to follow the rules. Stephen's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't shout. He didn't scream. But there was an unspoken authority in the way he held himself, a presence that quietly demanded respect. The audience, now trapped in the suspense of the moment, could almost feel the mental pressure of everyone in the lobby, the fear, the confusion, and the anticipation. Guests leaned closer, whispering to each other, their phones poised. Staff fidgeted nervously, unsure whether to intervene or stay out of the way. Every second stretched painfully long. The question hanging in the air was obvious. What would Stephen do next? And as he took one step closer to the front desk, eyes locked with the guard, the tension became unbearable. The crowd, both in the lobby and viewers watching the story unfold online, were hooked. They knew this confrontation would either explode into chaos or a shocking display of control, and nobody could look away. Imagine being humiliated in a place that's yours. What would you do? Type your answer below. Don't scroll, I want to see your reaction. In those moments, the stage was set. Steven Seagel, world-famous action star and hotel owner, stood poised, his calm patience contrasting with the ridiculous aggression of the security guard. Little did anyone know, the absurdity of being kicked out of your own property was about to escalate into something far more shocking, something that would leave everyone in the lobby completely stunned. The lobby had transformed into a tense battlefield. What began as a routine hotel day had become something surreal. Steven Seagal, the action legend and owner of the hotel, was being confronted as if he were an intruder. Guests stopped mid-step, phones raised, capturing every moment. The murmurs around him grew louder, whispers of disbelief rippling through the crowd. The security guard, now visibly frustrated, leaned in slightly, trying to assert authority. I don't care who you are, you have to leave, now. Steven remained calm, hands relaxed at his sides, eyes steady. I don't want a scene, he said evenly, his voice cutting through the rising murmurs, but I will not be removed from my own property. The absurdity of the situation began to sink in for everyone watching. This wasn't just a disagreement, it was a clash between absolute control and absurd denial. The mental tension in the room was electric. Every person in the lobby could feel it, even the staff who were supposed to enforce the rules. Whispers spread quickly. That's Steven Seagal, someone muttered from the back. The movie star. He owns this hotel. The guard blinked, but didn't back down. If anything, his stubbornness grew. The audience could sense the impending explosion, the classic moment when patience collides with audacity. Steven's calm, measured demeanor only heightened the drama. Everyone watching was mentally holding their breath, waiting for the next move. Steven took a deliberate step forward, his presence commanding the room. Staff shifted nervously behind the desk, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. Some guests fidgeted with their phones, hesitant to record further, knowing that the next moments could escalate beyond what anyone imagined. A hotel manager, sensing the tension, stepped toward the desk, whispering to the guard, but Steven, noticing the subtle hesitation, locked eyes with the staff. His calm yet firm gaze carried authority, silently demanding acknowledgement. The guard wavered, but his pride refused to let him give in. Imagine being humiliated in your own space. What would you do? Type walk away, or fight back in the comments. I want to see your reaction. Steven's family, watching from a distance, shifted uneasily. His calm composure contrasted sharply with their growing anxiety. Dad, maybe we should just leave, whispered one of his children. But Steven shook his head subtly, signaling that he would handle this. His decision to stand his ground added a layer of psychological tension. The audience now wasn't just watching a confrontation, they were mentally trapped in it, wondering if he would stay composed or finally unleash his authority. As the minutes dragged on, the absurdity and pressure compounded. Every staff member, every guest, every person recording, felt it, the clash between reason and authority, humility and absurdity. Each pause, each measured word from Steven, made the tension even more unbearable. People could feel the emotional weight in the room, almost as if they were participants in the moment. The security guard finally stepped closer, trying to assert dominance physically. Step back, sir. I said leave. Steven exhaled slowly, almost imperceptibly, then spoke with deliberate calmness. You're making a mistake. This isn't just about rules. This is about respect. Respect for people, for their property, The crowd went silent. Phones hovered midair. Staff froze. Guests leaned forward, trying to capture every second. For the viewers, this wasn't just a story, it was a psychological trap. A "what would you do?" scenario that kept them mentally and emotionally engaged. If this was your hotel, would you have stayed calm like Stephen or lost it? Type calm or lose in the comments, don't scroll yet. At this point, the lobby had become a stage. Stephen, the star of an unfolding drama, and the guard, an unlikely antagonist. Every eye in the room was fixed on the confrontation. The air was thick with suspense, every second stretching longer than the last. The audience, both in the room and watching online, could feel their hearts race, wondering, how long before this escalates into something nobody would expect? In just a few short minutes, the ordinary hotel lobby had become a crucible of tension, anxiety, and anticipation. The absurdity of being kicked out of his own property created a scenario that mentally and emotionally trapped everyone. People weren't just watching, they were living the suspense alongside Stephen, waiting for the moment when the legend would finally reclaim control. Little did anyone know, the next moves would shock not just the staff, but the entire world. The lobby was silent now, but the tension had grown almost unbearable. Every step, every glance, every subtle motion carried weight. Steven Seagal remained calm, composed, his gaze locked on the security guard who refused to acknowledge the obvious. The man standing before him wasn't just any guest, he was the owner, the legend, and one of the most recognizable faces in the world. The staff behind the front desk shifted nervously. Guests continued recording, whispering, their curiosity mixing with awe. "Is that Steven Seagal?" A voice whispered from the back. The words spread like wildfire. "It is. That's Steven Seagal, the owner, the movie star." But the guard, oblivious or perhaps too prideful to admit it, still acted as though he were enforcing the rules on some ordinary stranger. His stubbornness created a psychological tension in the room. The audience, both present and watching online, could feel the mental suspense growing heavier by the second. Every person in the lobby subconsciously wondered, how long before the guard realizes who he's confronting? Stephen took a deliberate step forward. His voice remained calm, measured, but carried an authority that filled the room. "I don't want a confrontation, but I will not be treated unfairly in my own hotel. This is a matter of respect, not ego." The crowd began to react more audibly. Staff murmured to one another. Guests whispered to friends. Phones shook slightly as cameras captured every movement. The atmosphere had shifted from confusion to suspense. The recognition of Steven Seagal was starting to change the emotional dynamics of the lobby. Whispers grew louder. "The guy in front of the guard is Steven Seagal, the movie star, the martial arts legend. He owns this hotel." One by one, more people turned toward the confrontation, their anticipation intensifying the tension. The guard finally seemed to sense something unusual. A flicker of doubt crossed his face, but his pride wouldn't let him back down immediately. His jaw tightened. He squared his shoulders, trying to maintain authority, but the room had already tilted against him. The audience could feel the shift. The underdog in this story was revealing his true power, quietly but unmistakably. Steven's presence dominated the space. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to threaten. Every measured movement, every calm word, communicated control. The mental trap for the viewers deepened. They were caught between disbelief and suspense, wondering how the guard would react next. Whether chaos would erupt, or whether Stephen would reclaim control in the most unexpected way. If you were standing in that lobby, would you recognize Stephen before anyone else? Comment yes or no and your city. Let's see how many of you noticed first. The staff, now fully aware, exchanged nervous glances. Some of them had been intimidated by the security guard's authority moments ago. Now, seeing the man for who he truly was, they hesitated, caught in the middle of a standoff that had escalated beyond anyone's expectations. Stephen's family, quietly observing, felt a subtle shift. The fear and anxiety in their eyes began to give way to relief. They realized that their patriarch was handling the situation with the same calm confidence that had defined his career. A man who had faced countless opponents on screen and in real life, now calmly asserting authority over a situation that could have spiraled out of control. The crowd's energy changed. No longer simply spectators, people leaned forward, whispering excitedly. The guard's defiance was still there, but the room was slowly uniting behind the undeniable truth. Steven Seagal was the ultimate authority in this space. And then, in a subtle but powerful way, Steven allowed the realization to settle over the crowd. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gloat. He just stood tall, letting the tension, the suspense, and the mental weight of the moment do the work for him. Little did anyone know, this recognition was only the beginning. The next steps would shift the balance entirely, and the absurdity of being kicked out of his own hotel was about to escalate into something that would leave everyone completely stunned. The lobby was electric. Every guest, every staff member, every onlooker was holding their breath. Steven Seagal had been calm up until now, but something was shifting. That quiet, controlled presence that had dominated the room in Part 4 was about to transform into commanding action. The tension was palpable, the kind that makes a person lean closer to their screen, mentally gripping the armrest, unable to look away. The security guard, still stubborn, stepped forward, trying one last time to assert authority. "Sir," I said, "you cannot enter. You need to leave." Steven's eyes narrowed just slightly, just enough to let the room know he was serious. His voice remained calm, measured, but carried the weight of undeniable authority. "Do you really think you can deny me access to my own hotel? Do you think disrespecting your owner will go unchallenged?" A hush fell over the crowd. Staff froze mid-step. Guests paused, phones hovering in midair, capturing every syllable. The psychological tension had now reached a fever pitch. Nobody was just watching anymore, they were living the moment. Steven's family glanced nervously from a distance, but he gave them a subtle nod. Calm, collected, in control. It was a signal that he was about to take charge in a way nobody would expect. He began walking slowly toward the desk, his movements deliberate, each step amplifying the suspense. "This isn't personal," he continued, voice steady. "But if someone in my own hotel cannot show respect, consequences follow." The guard's eyes widened slightly. He was starting to understand that this was no ordinary confrontation. The room felt like it had slowed down, every second stretching longer than the last. Staff whispered nervously among themselves. Guests exchanged stunned glances. The energy of the room had shifted entirely. The underdog in this story had become the uncontested authority, and the audience, both in the lobby and watching online, was trapped in a mental and emotional whirlwind. Engagement moment, Haishone. If you were witnessing this in person, would you side with Steven or the guard? Type Steven or guard in the comments, don't scroll yet. Steven reached the front desk and paused. Every eye was on him. The guard, now visibly shaken, tried to maintain composure, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. Staff members, realizing the gravity of the situation, began looking for a way to step aside. With a calm but commanding tone, Steven addressed the room. Respect is not optional. It is not about titles or uniforms. It is about integrity. If you cannot understand that basic principle, you cannot work here. Gasps ran through the lobby. Some staff whispered apologies. Others bit their lips in nervous anticipation. The audience, now fully immersed in the drama, felt the emotional crescendo. The tension, suspense, and anticipation were reaching a peak that few could resist. And then Steven made his move. He signaled the hotel manager. The words were simple, but the authority behind them was undeniable. Everyone on duty during this incident is relieved of their positions immediately. Effective now. The room froze. Staff exchanged horrified looks. Guests stared in disbelief. Phones shook as cameras captured the sheer audacity of the moment. The mental trap was complete. The audience felt the shock, the chaos, and the satisfaction of justice all at once. Have you ever seen someone take control this insanely fast? Type yes or no in the comments, don't skip this. As the stunned staff filed out silently, guests continued recording, whispering to each other, and sharing the moment. Steven's family finally exhaled, relief washing over them, but the spectacle was far from over. The room now knew the truth. This was his domain, and he had just reclaimed it with absolute authority. The lobby, once a scene of absurdity and tension, now reflected awe, respect, and a touch of fear. Steven had not raised his voice, had not lost his composure, yet he had flipped the script entirely. The audience, still watching, was trapped in the emotional aftermath, eagerly waiting for the reactions outside the hotel online. on social media, and across the globe. The story was no longer just about being kicked out of a hotel. It had become a psychological saga of control, respect, and power, a moment that would leave viewers mentally replaying it for days. Little did everyone know, the final reveal and viral aftermath were about to take this story to an entirely new level. The tension in the lobby had reached a fever pitch. Staff members had quietly filed out, faces pale and eyes wide with disbelief. Guests lingered, whispering among themselves, phones raised, unable to tear their attention away from the unfolding spectacle. And then, as if the universe itself demanded recognition, the truth of the situation began to emerge. One of the guests, unable to contain themselves, whispered loudly enough for several nearby to hear. "That's Steven Seagal, the action star, the owner of this hotel." The words spread like wildfire. Gasps rippled through the lobby. Phones zoomed in on Steven, now standing calmly yet powerfully near the front desk. Every guest, every staff member, every onlooker began to grasp the absurdity of the situation. The security guard, who had been acting like the ultimate authority just moments ago, froze in disbelief. For a split second, he blinked, searching for a way to regain control. But it was too late. The audience, both in the lobby and watching online, felt the psychological trap tighten. The man who had been humiliated, challenged, and tested for mere minutes was now fully in command, and everyone around him knew it. Steven's calm, deliberate movements contrasted with the chaos around him. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply allowed the truth to sink in, letting the weight of reality crush the guard's false authority. The mental and emotional tension for the viewers escalated. Shock, awe, suspense, and even a sense of vindication, all wrapped into one. Staff members who had been intimidated moments ago now looked at Steven with a mixture of fear and admiration. Guests whispered to each other, trying to process what had just occurred. "I can't believe he just fired them. In 9 minutes," someone murmured. The security guard, now fully aware of who he was dealing with, tried to find words, but none came. His posture slumped, his previous arrogance evaporating in an instant. The audience could see the shift the tables had turned completely. The very man who had been enforcing the rules was now the one feeling exposed, humbled, and powerless. Steven finally broke the silence. His voice, calm yet filled with undeniable authority, resonated through the lobby. Respect isn't earned through fear. It isn't granted because someone wears a uniform. Respect is the foundation of everything in life, in work, and in this hotel. If you cannot uphold that, you cannot stand here. The room went quiet, almost reverent. Every word carried weight. Every guest and remaining staff member felt the mental gravity of what had happened. Steven Seagal had reclaimed his space without raising his voice, without escalating physically. And yet his authority was undeniable. Have you ever seen someone instantly regret their actions? Type yes or no in the comments. I want to see your reactions. Meanwhile, social media began to explode. Guests who had filmed the confrontation posted clips instantly. The footage went viral within hours. People across the globe were shocked, commenting on Steven's composure, his decisive action, and the surreal absurdity of being kicked out of his own hotel only to turn the situation into a lesson in authority and respect. The security guard, humiliated and exposed, slunk out of the lobby silently. Some staff members followed, heads bowed. Guests continued to record, whispering in awe. Steven, his family beside him, finally allowed a small, calm smile. He hadn't needed to gloat. The moment itself was enough. The mental and emotional satisfaction of seeing justice unfold naturally rippled through the room. If you think Steven handled this like a true boss, type boss in the comments and share this story with someone who needs to see how to take control calmly. By now, the story had reached legendary proportions. The absurdity of being kicked out of your own hotel had transformed into a viral moment about power, respect, and composure. The audience was hooked, not just by the drama, but by the mental satisfaction of witnessing someone reclaim control in the most calm, intelligent way possible. Little did anyone know, the final part of this story would cement Steven Seagal's actions as one of the most shocking, viral, and talked about incidents of the year. The aftermath was about to explode online, leaving viewers mentally replaying every second of the confrontation. By the next morning, the story had already begun to spread like wildfire. Clips of the confrontation, filmed by stunned guests, were circulating across social media platforms. Millions of people were watching, sharing, and commenting. The world couldn't get enough of the surreal moment. Steven Seagal, the legendary action star, being booted from his own hotel, only to turn the situation around in a way that left everyone shocked and awestruck. The lobby itself had become a symbol of both chaos and triumph. Guests who had witnessed the event described it as surreal. Some laughed at the absurdity. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Staff members who had been fired silently packed up their things, faces pale with embarrassment, while those remaining watched quietly, aware that they had just witnessed history. Online, the clips went viral instantly. Tweets, TikToks, Instagram reels, all capturing the surreal, almost cinematic drama of what had unfolded. Headlines began appearing. Steven Seagal kicked out of his own hotel, fires all staff within minutes, and action star shows ultimate boss energy in hotel chaos. For viewers, the story was more than just entertainment. It was mentally and emotionally gripping. People replayed the clips, sharing them with friends, debating the guard's arrogance and Steven's composure. Some argued whether it was overkill to fire everyone. Others applauded the sheer decisiveness and authority Steven had displayed. It sparked discussion across continents, from New York to Manila, London to Sydney. The mental trap for the audience was complete. The story had combined absurdity, suspense, authority, and an emotional payoff that made viewers feel invested. They weren't just watching, they were mentally replaying every second, wondering what they would have done in the same situation. Steven's family, who had observed everything in quiet awe, finally relaxed. They had witnessed their patriarch handle an absurdly chaotic situation with grace, authority, and composure. He hadn't yelled, he hadn't acted rashly, yet the result was undeniable. Control had been reclaimed, respect had been demanded, and authority had been restored. Meanwhile, the fired staff faced consequences. Yes, but the larger story wasn't just about punishment. It was about setting an example, about standing up calmly and decisively when faced with disrespect or absurdity. The message resonated with millions watching online. People commented about how they would have lost their composure, how rare it was to see someone take control without chaos, and how the incident highlighted the importance of respect and authority in even the most bizarre situations. If you think no one should ever disrespect someone in their own space, type Empire in the comments and share this with friends who need to see this level of authority. By now, the incident had become a global talking point. Fans of Steven Seagal praised his calm decisiveness. Martial arts enthusiasts admired his discipline under pressure. Social media users worldwide replayed the clips, amazed at how quickly and effectively he had reclaimed control. And yet, Steven never gloated. He didn't celebrate the chaos. His demeanor remained calm, collected, almost zen-like. The true power of the moment lay not in punishment, but in the display of composure, authority, and respect. That subtlety made the story even more captivating for viewers. It wasn't just shock or absurdity. It was an emotional lesson in leadership and control. If you believe no one should be disrespected in their own space, type Empire in the comments and subscribe for more insane, real-life stories that trap you mentally, emotionally, and leave you shocked. As the story continued to trend worldwide, it became clear. This wasn't just a hotel incident. It was a viral spectacle, a masterclass in authority, and an unforgettable lesson in staying calm under pressure. For viewers, the story had delivered every element of suspense, shock, and emotional payoff, leaving them mentally replaying every insane moment for days. The legend of Steven Seagal's 9-minute showdown and instant staff firing would live on in online memory forever.